Okay, so for the first one, what they want is they want a composition of these functions. So because they want a composition of these functions, and you can know that they want a composition because of this, they want us to find f of g of x, which that means we want to put the function f on the outside, so I'm going to write the function f. But really, we're going to replace this x with the function g. So really, I don't want that function, that x right there. We're going to take g and plug it in for x. So my function g is 3x plus 3. So I'm going to plug that in for x. Now we just kind of go through and evaluate this like we normally would. So we're going to take this 2 and distribute it to both those numbers on the inside. That's going to give us 6x plus 6 plus 2. We're then going to combine like terms. So 6 plus 2 is 8. So I'm going to get 6x plus 8. And that would be my final answer, which looks like that is D. So that would be my answer. Let's try the next one. Okay, so for the second one, we're going to try this problem. And this, it wants us to factor. And the hard part about factoring this is we have a number in front. So if you remember from before, anytime that we have a number in front, we can't just make two boxes and kind of go through it. What we'd want to do is we want to take the first number times the last number. So we do 4 times 63, and that gives us 252. So we want to think of two numbers that are going to multiply together to give us 252, but then add together to give us 4. So that's going to take us just a second to think about. And the numbers for us would be 14 and 18, or positive 18 and negative 14, because that would give us our negative 252 that we needed, but when they add together, they would give us our positive 4. So then we'd have 4x squared plus 18x minus 14x minus 63. Now again, because we have a 4-nomial, what we want to do is cut that in half. When I cut it in half, I want to divide out the same number in front, which the same number would be 2 and an x. I want to divide out the same number in the back, which in this case would be negative 7. What you would get on the inside here would be 2x plus 9, and what you would get on the inside here would be 2x plus 9. Because these two things are the same, we factor them out and put them together. And because these things are left over, we put them in the other same radical back here. So now we have 2x plus 9 times 2x minus 7, and you can see that that answer would be C. If you struggle at factoring this way, which makes sense. The guess and check method in this one actually is a little bit easier because they give you your 4 answers. So because you give you your 4 answers, you don't really have to guess. You just have to check which one would multiply out to be this answer right here. So I would just take all 4 of your multiple choice questions, multiply them out, and see which one matches the one that you want. Let's try the next one. For this one, they wouldn't want us to solve this quadratic. To solve this quadratic, I'm probably going to use the factoring method because this thing looks like it can factor and looks like it would be pretty easy to factor. So I'm going to think about what multiplies together to give me z, or what multiplies together to give me 27, and adds together to give me negative 6. In this case, I believe that would be negative 9 and positive 3. Again, we want to figure out what makes that equal to 0. So what would make that equal to 0 would be positive 9, because 9 minus 9 is 0, and negative 3, because negative 3 plus 3 would be 0. These would be our two answers, or C again for this case. For this problem, they'd like us to subtract the two functions. Since they'd like us to subtract the two functions, I'm going to write down what they have, which is x squared minus 9 minus, and I'm going to rewrite this so it kind of matches the form we're used to. negative x plus 2. When we subtract these things, I have no x squared to minus with over here, so that'd just be x squared. Well, if you minus a negative number, you're going to get a positive number. And then negative 9 minus 2 would give us negative 11. So B would be our final answer for this case. Be very careful on your signs. Something that you can do that I think is a little bit easier sometimes is just distribute through that minus sign to all the numbers in here, and then it really shows you what the true signs of those things are. Let's try the next one. Okay, so for this problem we're going to want to find its inverse. To find the inverse of a function, all you have to do is switch the x and y. So that what's an inverse means. It means flip the x and y. So this is our y for this case. Whoops, let me grab my pen. And this would be the x for this case. So we would have x equals y plus 2 cubed minus 8. Now we have to undo this and kind of get it all by itself. So the first thing I would do is I would add 8 to both sides and get x plus 8 equals y plus 2 cubed. Now I'm going to take the cube root of both sides to undo that, which is going to give me the cube root of x. I'm not writing that very well. X plus 8 equals y plus 2. Then we'd want to subtract 2 from both sides. And when I subtract 2 from both sides, I'm going to get the cube root of x plus 8 minus 2 equals y. And that would be my final answer. The only thing you need to be careful of is cube roots. You don't have to put a plus or minus by them because you can actually take a cube root of a negative number. But if you had a square root, you'd have to do plus or minus. So anytime we take the square root of both sides, you have to make sure that you do a plus or minus so that your equation kind of all works out. Try the next one. For this one, we have to find the domain and range and then decide whether the relation is a function. Well, domain and range is pretty easy because domain are your x values and range are your y values. So we just have to find its x and range and then decide if it's a function or not. You can decide if something's a function or not by seeing if any x's repeat. That's the definition of a function, is for every x you only get one y, or like you don't get repeating x's. So when I look at this, I don't have repeating x's, so this thing is a function. So these two are wrong. And then the domain is 0, 1, 2, and 3, which is that one right there. And the range is -5, 0, 3, and 6. So that would work out right there. So C would be my answer. Let's try the next one. Okay, so we have to find the domain and range for this graph. To find the domain and range of this graph, we just kind of look at it. The domain for the x's, so the domain is the x's, it starts at 0. And it goes off to infinity. So the domain is 0, infinity. The range looks like it starts down here at -1, and it goes up here and off to infinity. These would both be boxes because we have that point right there, and these would both be parentheses because infinity is not a number. It's like more of a concept. So you can never reach infinity, so we don't have infinity. So B looks like it'd be the right answer. The other way you could write this is if they wanted to write this in a different form, they could write it like this, like x is greater than or equal to 0. Because see how we start at 0 and we go off to infinity, so x is bigger than 0. Or the other way to write this would be that y is greater than or equal to -1. And that would be the other way to write that. Try the next one. For this one, they just want us to add the two functions together. So when I add these two functions together, I would have 6 plus 8, which would give me 14. And then I would have -8 plus -4, which would give me negative 12, which that would be D. Let's try the next one. Okay, so they wanted me to factor this. So when I look at factoring this, I look across and I see, oh, every single one shares a 2 and an x. So the first thing that I could divide out of all of these would be a 2 and an x. That would leave me x squared plus x minus 12. Now when I have this, I can think about what I could factor this into, which I could factor this into x plus 4 and x minus 3. So this would be my factor, or A would be the correct choice right here. Make sure before you try to factor stuff with cubes that you look across and see if you can divide anything out. Try the next one. Okay, so this one right here, it has a number in front. Anytime it has a number in front and it's a quadratic, I'm probably going to use the quadratic formula to solve this. So to do that, I'd have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that would be negative 17 plus or minus the square root of 17 squared, which is 289, minus 3 times 4 times 20, which gives me 240. And that's all over 2a, which is 6. Well, now, what that's going to equal is that would be negative 17 plus or minus 289 minus 240 is 49. So that's going to actually become a nice number. And the square root of 49 is 7. So we're going to get negative 17 plus 7 over 6. And we're going to get negative 17 minus 7 over 6. So then when I do that, negative 17 plus 7 would be negative 10 over 6. And this one would be negative 24 over 6, which this one would give me negative 4, and this one would give me that fraction that they have reduced. So it looks like B would be my final answer. So again, anytime you see a number in front of the A value, factoring becomes a lot harder. And since factoring becomes a lot harder, what I generally try to do with that is I try to use the quadratic formula. Try the next one. For this one, they want to know possible discriminants. So discriminants tell you how many solutions you have. And in this one, when I look, I go, oh, I have 2 solutions. And the way I know that I have 2 solutions is a solution is where it crosses the axis. So you have a solution here and a solution here. If you remember the chart before for how the discriminant helps you is, the discriminant is that thing under the square root. So if you have a positive number under the square root, you get 2 answers. If you have a negative number under the square root, you get no answers. And if you have a 0 under the square root, you get 1 answer, because positive 0 and negative 0 are the same. So when I look through here, well, that one's 0, so that would only give me 1 answer. That's going to not work. This is a negative, so that's not going to work. C is a positive, so that would be my answer, or that would give me 2 answers. Let's try the last. So for this one, they want to know how many answers they will get. So again, this is a discriminant question. So we just care about the underneath part of the square root and to see how many answers we'd get from that. So underneath the square root is b squared minus 4ac, which for us would be negative 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 36. When we do this, we'd get 144 minus 144. So that would be 0 underneath the square root. And we know that plus or minus 0 would give us 1 answer, because positive 0 and negative 0 are the same thing. If you have any questions, please ask. please, again, make sure that you're going through and working through all these problems. You're going to want to have a good idea going into the final, and you're not going to want to cram the night before. You won't be able to memorize how to do everything the night before. So keep trying as you go through, doing a little bit at a time.